and welcome to the next instalment of Recharge with Consult. I'm joined here today with Jeff Bishop, who is CEO of Key Capture Energy, someone that we've been speaking to over the last few weeks, and someone I'm really excited to delve into the background of. Safe to say, Jeff, you probably didn't take the most conventional route into renewables, but yeah, from my side, I think what you're doing currently is massively exciting. And just I've given a bit of an overview, but explain to the listeners today kind of who you are and what you're doing currently.
Great. Yeah, no, thank you very much for having us here. So my name is Jeff Bishop, and I'm a co-founder and CEO of Key Capture Energy. So we develop, construct, own, and most importantly, operate large-scale battery storage projects that can really help balance out intermittent wind and intermittent solar as we move to a world that's going to be 100% powered by clean energy. I first got involved in the clean energy sector in 2002. So before that, I was working on my degree in electrical and computer engineering. And so all my internships in the last years of high school and early stages of college, they were all in tech, and they were all computer engineering focused. And then in 2001, for those that are a little bit on the older side, that we had a massive collapse in the technology sector. And so at that point, I'm 19, and it's like, all right, well, there's not a clear path on this anymore. And so I got a internship working on a wind farm over in Morocco, and that just changed everything. And so, it always seems like whenever I talk with people and I find out about their career progression, people kind of stumble into an area and then they become passionate about it.
Yeah.
And so similar to me, where, I've been in renewables ever since.
Amazing. So you parked the dream of what was your original dream when you were doing computer programming?
Yeah, so back in when in between my last year of high school and first year of college, so I worked for a Pittsburgh-based tech company that got bought by a big multinational and had all these plans. And I remember I sat down with the VP of technology there. I would always email people and just be like, hey, can I get 15 minutes of your time just to find out about your path? And people always say yes, it's great. With that, I was telling him that I was most interested in probably the product marketing side,
right?
Where you have this at that point, they were asynchronous transfer modes. They were just these really big server type things. And the sales process of that and the marketing and the customer segment, that was the most interesting part for me.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me where he's like, all right, well, to be entirely blunt, I can teach you marketing in 3 days. I can't teach you electrical engineering. and having taken a bunch of marketing classes through my MBA, you need a lot longer than 3 days to understand it. But I respected where he was coming from, so that's what caused me to get into that. So had clean energy not worked out, I would have followed friends to go join Facebook in 2005 instead. So yeah, totally different path. They're all retired now. I'm not. So, maybe they made the correct.
If you joined Facebook in the early days, probably you would be, yeah. So how did that come about then, in terms of, you kind of mention it as if it's just a normal thing to do, to go and just do an internship in Morocco on a wind farm at a time where I'm sure everyone will understand, but wind farms weren't the norm. So again, we're talking 20 years ago, where again, I've been saying to a few people this week, actually, it's the way how far renewables has come, and having conversations with people like yourself, you do genuinely look back. And I've only been working with it in 8 years, and only 2.5 years or 3 years of that has been in the US. And I have already seen a vast difference between the way it was then and the way it is now. So for you, it must be a completely different world.
Yes and no. So it's the issues are still the same, and there's still a lot of the same public perception.
Yeah.
and there's still a lot of the same questions that happen. And I apologize, working from home, my dog is kind of going around the office a bit, so apologize for that. But it definitely, like whenever I'm recruiting people for my team, I'm always asking, like, tell me about a time you created something out of nothing. Because, like in 2002, when nobody was doing wind farms, you really had to like build the market, and you had to figure out the stakeholders and figure out how to navigate. And so I got the internship because an alum from Rice University graduated, 15 years before, and he was over there working on wind farms. And so got it through the school connection. But in reality, like it was totally stumbling in. It could have been a very, very different path for me had I not been connected, 20 years ago to a wind farm developer.
Absolutely. And so what obviously moved through a variety of different companies, some bigger beasts. I mean, EDPR, obviously absolutely huge. They, I guess, kind of took a more non-conventional route, starting off as an economist, and again, kind of moving into policy. So what, from being on a wind farm to what pushed you kind of that route?
Yeah, so I don't like competition. And so, like, if you're going to a big consulting firm or what have you, or an investment bank, like you're always evaluated versus, 20 or 30 peers. And it's a lot easier to be the best at what you do whenever you're the only one doing it.
Yeah.
And so, I was very fortunate in 2006 to join what was then called Horizon Wind Energy, which was a 40-person wind company in the US that then, got purchased by EDP.
Mm-hmm.
And always my role at the company was just whatever was needed for a rapidly growing company. And so it started off in finance, doing all the economic models. It moved to financial manager over in Madrid whenever we were IPOing and needed to create the financial planning controls. I was a development associate. I was special projects, led all the business process management and innovation. And then I really found my niche on the policy side because, like when you're trying to put together all the components to make a successful project, people in the energy sector always underestimate the importance of policy and regulatory.
Yeah.
And so creating those markets and figuring out the stakeholders and for instance, like in Connecticut in 2010, I remember we had a wind farm up in Maine that our company was not able to get into construction and operations because we didn't have a contract. And so then at that point, it's like, all right, well, across the New England states, Massachusetts and Connecticut can really, be able to do the bigger projects and support it compared to Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont. And so then at that point, you get a lobbyist, you join trade groups, you discuss with all the environmental advocates, and you really work together in order to put together a package that to be considered by the legislature that enables them getting the clean energy that they want at the lowest price for the ratepayers, while also allowing for the commercial contracts for these projects to get built. So I love doing that. I did it for about 5 years. It was great.
Yeah. What was it specific? I completely agree. It's a massively underrated area, and it's one interesting now. Again, kind of probably you're a bit ahead of your time in terms of it's now something that is the foundation of all commercial decisions in terms of where do we launch now, where do we further put our investment into. It's the thing that is almost the foundation of those decisions. So again, I love how almost rebrand entrepreneurial with selfish or just don't like competition. I think that's a remarkably fresh way of looking at it. But yeah, no. So you went through that model, and again, kind of, I do think kind of we're fairly ahead of your time there. And then I guess kind of, was life too easy, and that's kind of why you chose to launch into, again, kind of a fairly immature industry in terms of battery storage and co-found co-found Key Capture? What was the motivation for you?
Yeah, so really for me, so back in 2015, 2016, I was working for Brookfield Renewable out of New York City. And I started seeing the same cost curve for battery storage that existed 10 years before for solar panels. Except I knew for battery storage that instead of German, incentives, instead of Ontario feed-in tariffs, instead of New Jersey solar recs, really driving the creation of the industry, that electric vehicles were going to be the ones that were driving it. And so then at that point, stationary storage, we get the benefit of the rapidly declining cost curve. And then it just becomes a question of at what point does it make sense? And so whenever you are developing a battery storage project, utility scale, can take anywhere between 2 and 8 years to go through the interconnection process, get all the permits, align all the commercial contracts before you can build it. And so kind of had the thesis 2015, 2016 that with the rapidly declining cost curve, at some point it's going to make sense everywhere. And batteries will be replacing natural gas peakers, or solar plus storage will be replacing baseload. And so I put together a business plan and I took it to the CEO and board chair of Brookfield Renewable. And the feedback I got was that it was kind of bad. So, there's a bunch of question marks and I'm like, well, I kind of think this is where the industry is going, but, it's not entirely clear. And, there were no, really clear paths.
Yeah.
And then they also told me where it's like, yeah, we're Brookfield. So, unless we see a path to being able to invest 500 million, it's not big enough for us. And so at that point, my co-founder now, former colleague that has a complementary skill set, Dan Fitzgerald, he and I had been serving on regional advocacy boards, like the Alliance for Clean Energy New York together. And he was at a different company and it's like, all right, well, do you want to try this? Don't know the path. I don't know how it's going to go, but here's the thesis. And so, at that point, then we quit our jobs and started a company up.
Amazing. So what did you have to do to get it off the ground for a start?
Yeah, so we didn't take outside money for 6 months because we wanted to prove the model and actually make a business plan that was solid. So we spent the first 6 months, really, really talking to a ton of people, sitting down with New York independent system operator staff, sitting down with state agencies, figuring out on the manufacturing side, all the components there. And then we thought we had something. So then we started doing the basic development processes of figuring out where you want the project to go, getting land. And then after we had our first lease signed, then we went and got angel funding, which is honestly a bunch of the old Horizon Wind colleagues from 2006, the same group. Yeah. And then, we were able to go along, get more projects, and then we went out for a big fundraise in 2018 and linked up with a really great sustainable asset fund that was able to, give us 3 years of growth before we had to go to the next stage as far as capital stack. Incredible.
So in terms of, so it was you and one other from the start. For those that don't know, just to explain where exactly you are, I guess going to come from a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper, probably not too dissimilar to us, to be honest, in the US, a blank piece of paper to where we are now in 3 years. But just explain to everyone in terms of where you are as a business now, just 3 years later.
Yeah, definitely. So since our start in 2016, we are, I think, the largest owner of battery storage projects in New York. We're in the top 3 in Texas. And after we get our projects from construction into operations, it should be number 1 or number 2. And then we are rapidly developing projects, across the US right now. And so we are owned by a South Korean company called SKENS. Their sister company is building all the batteries in Georgia and Tennessee for the Ford F-150s. And so they have a really distinct view on how the world is rapidly going to be moving, on the mobility side with electric vehicles, on the power side with wind, solar batteries, to this 100% clean energy world. And so they're a fantastic partner. And now with us, we have a business plan on investing a few billion over the next few years and really building up our capabilities, especially on the software side, in order to be able to fully participate in all these wholesale markets across the US.
Incredible, like absolutely incredible. For what is, again, kind of an industry that has come so far over a short space of time, but I'm sure excitingly for you has a hell of a lot further to go as well. But to get to where you've got to, I just think is so impressive. So in terms of you've come a long way already in a very short space of time. What's your vision for the company as you see it? We've been going 5 years. Where do you see yourselves in the next, yourselves and the industry as a whole over the next 5 years?
Yeah, definitely. So it's funny, I look back to my 2016 business plan and it wasn't good. But then I looked to my 2017 business plan and we hit everything, across the board. We built out the team pretty much exactly how we were expecting. We built out our projects and our markets similar to how we were expecting. But the one area that I didn't see coming, though, was on the operations side. The amount of data and software that you need is incredible. And that's just because on the wind and solar side, you have intermittent electrons. You just push them out to the grid whenever the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. Yeah. With batteries, you're charging and discharging based upon market signals. And those market signals change both in the day ahead and real-time markets.
Yeah.
And so now in Texas, we have, I think, 104 feeds coming in every few seconds. And our algorithms, it's all machine learning and AI.
Yeah.
They bid into the market and change their bid every 5 minutes based upon all the data points that we have. And so that part is just going to be more and more key and more important. And so really where I see the company going the next 3 years is overall platform is going to be all, AI software. And then underneath that, it's going to be just a lot of batteries, some solar plus storage. Eventually, we'll be starting to integrate in mobility, electric vehicle charging, distributed energy resources, all participating in the wholesale market underneath that. We've also been very blessed by, we have a wonderful team. And so, it's when trying to figure out what exactly the market will be in 5 years, it's not really about us versus other storage developers or us versus wind or solar companies. Instead, it's honestly, it's going to be us versus Google being able to aggregate all their Nest thermostats and being able to participate in the wholesale markets as controllable load. It's going to be us versus Ford and Tesla, who will be able to participate with all their electric vehicles. It'll be Bitcoin miners, setting marginal prices because they can either manufacture cryptocurrency or they can, participate as a demand response, and whatever is, more expensive or, more profitable, they're going to take that. And so it's really building out the infrastructure and just really smart people in order to be ready for what, 2025, 2026 will bring.
Nice. So as someone that doesn't like competition, you mentioned some pretty serious competition there. So yeah. How does that make you feel?
First mover. So the really key thing about, this space is you need data. And so that we're able to get into markets really early and then be able to just really run all sorts of scenarios in order to be able to really figure out the capabilities of batteries and how they intersect with regulatory. That does give a moat. And, that first mover and all the data that we can integrate really does help improve everything. And so I'm okay with them coming into my space. I also know all the oil and gas companies in Houston, they're all coming into my space. Everybody knows power is going to be here. And that's exciting. Like, you know, we have an office of 20 people down in Houston. I went to school down there for undergrad. We welcome it. Everybody's going to be needing to play their part in order for us to be able to beat climate change in any way.
100%. So I was going to ask, so the markets, typically your main focuses have been New York and Texas, right? In terms of the markets. Why specifically those?
Yeah, so we like the markets that we think will be the growth ones in 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And so, you know, like we in 2016, we were like, all right, well, California is a clear one today. It will be the clear one in 5 years, but there was already a lot of competition there. And so instead, you know, we knew like New York, there was only Nexstar was there. In Texas, hardly anybody was there. And so hence it's like, all right, well, you know, we can get in now, help create the market. So lots and lots of meetings with the independent system operators, state agencies, with commercial counterparties, with utilities, and just really help shape like what the market will be.
Yeah.
And so, you know, in a similar way, our development pipeline, we're not public on a lot of it, but, you know, it's markets nobody would expect, but they're where we think all the growth will be, you know, in 2025, 2026, 2027.
Absolutely. And do you think there's, for you, I mean, I know the answer is absolutely yes, but given the fact that you've worked in renewables internationally, particularly Africa, which actually seems to be a fairly big place in terms of renewables and investment coming from the US, is that something that you're considering, as or for now is it kind of head down, let's do what we can in the US and see where we go?
Yeah, these markets are hard.
Yeah.
And so you know, just New York and Texas alone, like 3 years ago, I knew the nuance of every regulatory, you know, piece that was coming out of the working groups. Today, I can't.
Yeah.
You know, we have folks that, you know, are on that all day, every day. But just the US is a hard enough market. So I hope, you know, in 5 years that, you know, we'll be global, but at least the next 3 years, it's head down just North America.
Perfect. I think there's definitely more than enough to be going out there, and enough change and chaos, which is again kind of what we thrive off, right? But so as someone that speaks to people every day across multiple industries, you mentioned there again kind of Facebook, Google coming into the industry, how the industry's evolved around, I mean, data being information. Do you see data as being kind of the pivotal part in terms of that's going to be the competition derivative, in terms of that will decide who's high, who's low, etc., in terms of who's got the best handle on their data set?
Yeah, so like in 2006, when you were looking at competition in wind, you were competing on whether or not you had the windiest spot in a state. You were competing on if you had the interconnection. You were competing on which wind turbine you picked, you know, whether it was a Siemens or a Vestas or, you know, Suzlon. And then you're competing on your cost of capital. And so all of those determined what your power purchase agreement price was and whether or not you would clear RFPs and win.
Yeah.
Then, you know, in the solar side, like now we're really just down to, you know, it's not a differentiated product. And so you're competing on whether or not you have interconnection. You're competing kind of marginally on the cost of your solar panels, but in reality, they're a few percentages off. And then you're just competing on cost capital. And what is your view post PPA on what the merchant market will be, you know, in years 21 through 35?
Yeah.
So with batteries, you have to compete as far as your revenues, and your view of the market and your view of the revenues is all based on data. And so, so at that point, like the data really, really matters. And then you start to overlay everything else of what is your actual, commercial stack, and how much revenue certainty do you have, and what's your view as far as, are these 20-year, 35-year assets or what have you. But for now, it's just a really, really big range. But in reality, in the next 2-3 years, it's going to get commoditized too. And then really, like, where I think the differentiation will be going forward and where the profits are, it's just what you do with them. And so, like, the data part of it and how you actually can participate in the wholesale markets, and what you're comfortable with, as far as modeling for degradation or modeling for, repairing, different components, as far as preventative maintenance, like, that's going to be the differentiator. And so, that software side is just going to become more and more key.
Do you feel like you've almost come full circle in terms of you're a computer engineer that almost seems to kind of go absolutely wild left field in terms of going into renewables, wind, etc., and I guess kind of gone through these phases through policy, through to, again, kind of the development, launching entrepreneur, new company, and yet we're here talking about, again, kind of how data, as in computer engineering, is kind of the foundation of everything.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that as far as that arc.
You could, that's very humble. You could have quite happily sat there and said that I'm a visionary and I saw all this happening. So.
Then my co-founder too, he in the late 80s, early 90s, he was in software companies and, rode that wave. And so, that the two of us are now going back to kind of what we were doing in the 90s. It's a fascinating arc where, over the last few months, I've been able to really think about it more.
Yeah.
And, like, what you're taught as an engineer is, you have a big system and you can break it down into parts, and like how you think about it, like through a method, like that's where we are now. And so that's still super useful, but definitely what I learned 20 years ago in school, very different than the artificial intelligence and big data that we're using today. So, I can't even check any of our, I think we have like 10 people that program in Python, and like, I don't know Python. So it's a weird world.
Is that in terms of kind of your vision for the industry as a whole, and we look at how everything, again, is becoming a lot more interconnected? There's, once you factor in kind of wind, solar, storage plays a massive part into that. You obviously got grid upgrades, etc., which all bleeds into one another. In terms of, is that the main hurdle that you see then, getting a handle on the data and making sure that that part of the industry, which is probably fairly new, versus whack up a load of solar panels and like get them up and get it running, is that the way that it gets kind of the biggest hurdle that you see for everyone going forward, just getting a handle on that data?
Yeah, so up until now, the biggest hurdle was market participation, where every regional transmission organization, independent system operator, they all have their own ways that resources can get access to revenue.
Yeah.
And so getting those rules worked out so batteries can participate, in most markets, it's pretty clear, but we are still having to fight, at various levels, just to be able to get access to the same, rights, obligations, and payments that natural gas plants get. And so that's been the biggest hurdle up until now. Going forward, the biggest hurdle is, putting it all together, where, we have a really fascinating, electric network where a lot of the generation, especially wind and solar, are far away from load, and we don't have enough transmission lines to connect. And so this is where batteries really, really come into play, where we can be close into load. We can make sure those transmission lines are always utilized by drawing down power whenever the price signals are indicating, pushing it out whenever they're not. And so putting it all together, that's just a ton of analysis, as far as figuring out exactly where on the node you want to put your battery, exactly how you're going to be operating it. And so, yeah, I see that as being, one of the biggest hurdles for now for us. And then going forward, all the models on wind and solar, as far as looking into the future, have completely underestimated wind and solar penetration, like by a factor of 10, 20, 50, whatever. We're going to do the same with electric vehicles, where, like the US, I think they're thinking, some of the third-party reports will be like 3% electric vehicles by 2030. In reality, the Ford F-150 in year one of offering, it to be electric, I think they have 200,000 reservations for, 700,000 trucks per year, in conventional petrol. And so, like, it's going to flip real quick. And with the electric grid, it's not ready for millions and millions and tens of millions of electric vehicles coming in and charging at different times. So that's going to be the big challenge.
Right. I think it's manufacturing keeping up with demand. We saw the same thing in Europe, where I actually put my name down for Tesla, the S3, I think it was, basically the most affordable one. And I think it was running 2 years behind its estimated manufacture date, and in the end offered just to give everyone else their deposit back, because they were like, we have no idea when. I mean, I think there were talks of Elon Musk like sleeping like on the factory floor and everything else. I don't know how true that was or not, but great marketing either way, because we're talking about it. But yeah, I guess kind of that would be one of the main challenges. And as someone who's, again, kind of taken a slightly different path in terms of someone that, again, probably hasn't ended up quite where they thought they were going to end up, but we find ourselves in a slightly different world where renewables seems to be, if it's not number one, it's very close to number one in terms of what every grad wants to get into, every second, third jobber wants to get into, whether it's coming from petro, whether it's coming from wherever. As someone that's done it, as someone that's been really successful in it, what advice would you give to someone that's looking to get into the industry now?
Yeah. Great question. Like for me, it's always just finding a niche nobody's in and running with it. With that said, like, 20 years ago, companies were closed off to a lot of applicants. Like I remember, like, in 2007, I was like headhunted for a position, at a bioengineering company or bioenergy company. And, at that point, like I had a discussion with the recruiter where I'm just like, all right, well, how will I be successful here when literally every single person you have on your website, is a straight white man? It's like, I'm openly gay. There's probably not a spot at your company for me. And, it was a very awkward conversation with the recruiter at that point. And, it's like, okay, probably not. In a similar way where, like Houston, is 12% white men. But you look around any of the majors, and it doesn't reflect the community.
Yeah.
And so for folks getting in now, it's like, number one, things are way more open than what they were 20 years ago. So, like now at this point, people are finally realizing if you recruit from the top 12% of people, you may have done fine historically, but if you recruit from the top 100% of people, you're actually going to be better. Yeah. So I think like number one, like people are like way more open to actually, getting talent instead of going for, their historic clicks. And then number two, I get a lot of people like on the oil and gas side, especially we have, 20 people down in Houston, and, they're almost apologetic on, oil and gas, like being on the resume.
Yeah.
And, and I have to tell them, it's like, look, like you do these massive projects that require a skill set and discipline that historically our industry hasn't had. And like, it's needed, and like, we need you, like, come on over.
Yeah.
And so, so yeah, I mean, just overall, like, for those entering second careers, for those coming out of school, the industry needs the smartest people, and we're open. Like, you know, everybody's hiring right now, and like, we need all skill sets. So please apply.
I just think that's I don't think we could probably end on a better point, but honestly, it's, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And particularly on the oil and gas point, that again, people seem to think it's a personal offence, or again, kind of they're being personally held responsible for the oil and gas industry. It's, yeah, don't worry about it. There is a place for pretty much everyone within renewables that wants to do it and has the capability. So, no, a fantastic place to end. So, Jeff, what we'll do is, I think in a couple of years' time, we'll book in another session and see exactly where you are then. I'm sure that the industry as a whole will have drastically changed. I'm sure that, again, kind of the business and key capture will have massively changed and developed in that time. So thank you so much for your time. And your insight is so unique and so interesting. It's been a really, really good time to speak to you, and I'm sure people have got a lot from it. So thank you. And yeah, look forward to the next episode in the future.
Great. Thank you very much, Will. Really appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jeff.